20 minutes ago. I've got to remember. Do we have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Weinmark and Councillor Yousafzai, and their substitutes are Councillor Johnson and Councillor Orber.
Okay. Just, I'm having sat on Tapen Parish Council with Councillor Yousafzai. Yousafzai, sorry. You will get used to it. The number of people have said his name wrong in the 2 years I've been on the council with him. It's worth, yeah, I've had £1 for every time. Okay, item 3, minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 6th of June 2023 on page 6. I'd like to refer members to the minutes of the last meeting, check for accuracy and matters arising. Subject to this, we'll confirm if they're correct. They looked good to me, but if anybody else has got any questions regarding those, please let me know. Councillor Emsall.
Obviously, we got the apologies from Councillor Weinmark, but Councillor Mancini Boyle sub for Councillor Weinmark, but obviously I couldn't see her in the list of attendees.
You're correct. Well spotted. Gold star for you. Should have bought my little my star stamper from school for you. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay. Chairman's announcements. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Sorry, I have matters arising. Matters arising from that. There are no real matters arising. But have you got anything you'd like to add? Absolutely, go on.
At the last meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, I did mention that I had written to the Chief Executive complaining about the start time of this meeting. I can confirm I have had a response. It does explain the situation. Whether it justifies it is another matter entirely. But I simply accept the status quo and we continue at 6:30. Unless you change your mind.
Well, if we were to hold it during the day, you'd have to do without my dulcet tones. So I'm sure that the benefits of me being here will start to outweigh the negatives.
Perhaps they could debate on that.
Thank you. Anyone else got anything else they'd like to add at this point? Okay. I think we went to Chairman's announcements, and I have nothing particularly to state other than to highlight from the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that when that went before Cabinet, you'll note that there was a recommendation, there was in fact, a further recommendation relating to the Strategic Performance Risk and Finance Report, and it states here that the repurposing of part of the underspend will be set to establish an increased member ward budget of £1,000 per member and to establish a new a budget of £50,000 for a newly formed Community Action Fund panel. That will be coming before full council. That's why I didn't call that discussion into O&S. I know there were some emails to the to staff asking why I hadn't done that, because it's going to be discussed by full council. So then everyone gets to speak on this. So that's why. Public speaking.
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Okay. Item 6, pushing through. The report on the Time and Task Limited Panel of Housing Providers. Can I ask Councillor Steve Riley to speak on this?
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me? Yes, I think you can. If you can't, please put your hand up. Okay. Yes, well, thank you, Chair. I'm also here with Mike, who was our officer supporting, plus other officers that also attended during the Time and Task panel. The origins for this go back to 2014-15. The last time we did a review of housing associations was 8-9 years ago. But out of that came some useful recommendations that the council adopted. So it's sort of high time really to carry out another Time and Task inquiry. This was agreed a year ago, We met 7 times over that year. The fundamentals behind it were also driven from some recent government reports, complaints by ombudsmen, and also some coverage on the national news relating to the state of council housing, housing providers, condition of their properties, mould, etc. Some deaths that have occurred around the country as well. So it's a timely time and task to get engaged with and to have a look-see what's going on for our residents. I'm sure as a number of other councillors that have been here long term will know, we do have some residents who regularly contact us about issues with their housing providers, particularly around repairs, health and safety, etc., which we take up on their behalf. So you will sort of know about these matters. The 2 key areas we looked at, the first one was really focusing on what the SLAs. To give you one example, rather than sort of try and go through the whole thing here, and the issue of mould and damp, how looking at 3 providers that came in, 3 main providers, Clarion, Saffron and Flagship, who came before the time and task, what are your measurables on this? How often do you summarise how many complaints you've had in? How quickly have you dealt with them, putting the remedials into place? And we were quite surprised to find that there's very little information they could provide, and they varied between them in terms of what they could provide. Now clearly, if you haven't got this on a driver and on a target list to keep measuring as an organisation, then you don't really know where you are and what's really happening with these sorts of repairs. And I'm sure it exists within their organisations, but if you're not focusing in on it in this way, then it's very difficult for us as a council, in terms of our partnership arrangement with them and our referrals that we give to the Housing Association for those residents. It's very hard for us to have a watchful eye on that and help those organisations as well and their residents. So that's one example, and you can see clearly in the report that we're recommending there that a scheme of SLRAs are put in place and embedded. The government actually, from an ombudsman report, just so happens it's timely, 2 things going on at the same time. We were looking at this, and the same thing was going on with the ombudsman, with government, over a report that was done on Clarion during, I think it was the year before, that in actual fact this needs to improve. So the government is actually also going to be recommending to these housing providers, they do provide better measures, and particularly in terms of health and safety for residents. So it's a timely situation again for us. The other area was, of course, a concern around housing supply and what's going on out there in terms of that. We know that there's a hell of a lot of pressures within the marketplace at the moment. We know that rental accommodation, private sector is falling off a cliff. It has been over for a number of reasons over the last several years, and that's decidedly going to get worse over this year and next year with what's going on with interest rates. Also, housing associations found it quite difficult in terms of finding land. They also need to finance, which is now going to be another issue in terms of the commercial aspect of that, of lending money, etc. And of course, there's also the building of new housing and affordable housing as well. So we are actually facing a deteriorating situation in terms of that housing supply. And the officers were very acutely aware of that and gave us some quite clear understandings and examination of that, which was very welcomed by the Time and Task panel. So I think I'll probably just summarise around those 2 points as I have, Chair, and come to the recommendations. I know clearly, you know, people may want to ask questions, and also of Mike as well, and any other officers present that supports us. But you'll see within the recommendations, they're covered under point 4, which goes through the relevant bullet points. I'll just make one point here, just for clarity. You will see that there's an asterisk under such as police, children, that does relate to bullet point 3, and that was put in there just to make absolutely clear what we was talking about. The council and housing providers and other relevant providers should work together. So it's just an example of who we are actually talking about, i.e. police, children, social services, etc., That's all the asterisk is pointing to, really, for clarity. That was added in sort of the last thing, really. And I'll rest it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is very welcome from my point of view. But who would, can I ask, Mike, would you like to add anything to that, and perhaps sort of even feedback on how you feel that the whole process of the time and task panel worked in this case?
Thank you, Chairman. And firstly, on the time and task panel, the feedback, actually this was a really good example of where scrutiny really comes alive on its own. Scrutiny committee, overview scrutiny, picked a topic that was relevant, that was useful to understand and drill down more, and really positive member engagement in terms of this isn't about scrutiny, about bashing people. This is about finding and understanding issues to take forward. And actually that working group with officers, with our housing providers, who actually were really supportive and came on, and as Councillor Riley said, really good, fruitful debate about where we can go in the future, what are the issues, and how we can develop. So actually the process worked really well, and it was a really timely work on that. So really what we've got to is, we know there's a big issue, and where we're going today is, this is a starter. We've got 3 areas here around antisocial behaviour repairs. We know our housing providers have actually welcomed us to come and flag this as an issue, because our housing providers want to work with us to improve service provision. So we can take forward these under service level agreements. They've welcomed us in terms of the support, and we know that support has dropped off over the last decade or so in terms of new tenants coming in and how tenants are supported. So can we work with our partners to build that support up? Because I know when I had my first house, I'm lucky, I had a mum who told me that the vacuum cleaner had to come out of the cupboard, otherwise you couldn't clean anything. Now, not everyone has a mum like that, so so having support to actually support new tenants coming in, particularly when we have young tenants and people who live in care, how do they support and work in that housing to make their housing tenancy the best it can be? So that's a really good work stream that we can develop as well. And that housing strategy, working with Helen here about where do we want to be in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Now you can put a vision in place, but where are we in the next 5 years? Where do we want to be in the housing space? I think there's an opportunity for officers then to work with members to work up where we want to be and where we can intervene in the market, because as Councillor Riley said, there are huge pressures at the moment. Where does the council best place its resource and time to make that work? So overall, a really positive example of where scrutiny can impact and actually make a difference and take forward really relevant work streams over the next 4 years. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So it's given us some really good baselines, as it were, to measure, to actually check that what we're doing is providing benefit, and and that we're actually delivering a service to people who come to us for housing, and we know that it's actually measurable. That so how we can improve things in the future, basically. Thank you. Does any member like to come in on this? Councillor Jones first. I think he just beat you, Councillor Murrell, but you'll be next.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry. Good evening, Chairman. Point 3.3 on the report states that older properties have energy efficiency measures that can cause additional problems through damp and mould, for example. Was there a question to the providers about the standard of work that they're providing? Because if they're doing the job to a high standard, I wouldn't have thought that they would create those sorts of problems. The last part of that is these issues could be partly resolved through the right funding and interventions in place. Are you suggesting that the council fund social housing providers to do the repairs, or is it coming from the social housing provider budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So this was more of a statement about our ageing properties. When you do try and intervene, for example, you put energy efficient measures. What you can do is older properties are designed to release the water out from the area, and what you do is you basically seal the water problem in. So it is more complicated to deal with a older property than a newer property. Some of this is down to funding, some of it is down to workmanship, but I don't think there was a feeling that housing providers are doing a bad job. I just think it's just the nature of the stock. We're not suggesting for a minute that this is to say, right, the council going to directly intervene to pay housing providers. That doesn't feel right. I think this is an area we need to explore. How do we support this general improvement in older properties? And as Clarion have been nationally on news talking about, one of the issues they've got is an ageing stock. Now, where do we go in terms of releasing ageing stock, which perhaps are not in the right place for modern requirements? So, do we ensure that there's enough build there to replace that ageing stock? So, this is an area which needs further explanation and support. But we'll take that forward as we go on. Richard, do you want to just because Richard's the expert in this area?
Expert on damp is a fun thing to be. The other thing to add on, everything Mike said 100%, the next thing is education as well. So you can put in lovely windows and they've got trickle vents on them, which cost a little bit more than the housing association put in, and then the tenant understandably goes up to that trickle vent and goes, all my heat's escaping and I can't afford to heat my house, so then they shut the trickle vents, and trickle vents are there to let the moisture out and keep the heat in. Same with extractor fans. They turn off extractor fans when you desperately need that moisture outside the house. So there is an education point as well. So we need to work with our landlords to make sure that the right education's getting there, but we could do some more as well, because in essence, we give them the tenants. So we should be training them while they're in our temporary accommodation, while they're on our register, to make sure that they understand that there's going to be certain things in place in some of these properties. But modern properties aren't a problem because they're designed around their environmental situation. But post-war property, they're not designed in the way that we would do nowadays.
Councillor Murrell.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mike, Richard and Nick in what they did in the report and fetching it all together, because I think it was a really, really good report, and how it was all brought together was fantastic. And especially when we got the housing providers in, and I think they came in with slight trepidation, thinking that it was going to be an ear bashing, but the fact that we opened up, started talking about what we could do there for them, what they could do for us, looking at the SLAs was a really, really important piece of work. I'm more than happy to support the proposed actions, and again, linking, as we've tried to with other reports, linking it back to the regulator on the measures is a really good way to go forward. Then we don't have to keep fetching stuff back to change in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to comment on this? I'll go to Peter, then I'll go to Caroline.
No.
Oh.
It's very kind of you. I would like to concur with what Martin has said and the officers. This was a very good report, and I would like to second. Martin, are you proposing that we accept this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would like to second that, please. Thank you.
Slightly negative, I'm going to be, I'm afraid, sorry. I regard this report as almost an advert for a report that's going to follow it. It teases us with talking about service level agreements. Well, yes, of course, wouldn't we have service level agreements? You would expect that. It teases us also with the suggestion that the housing providers should work together. Well, yes, I think we could have all have determined those outcomes with very rapid speed. So my question is, when are we actually going to find out what these actual service level agreements are going to be, and how are you actually going to make sure that all these providers work together? Because at the moment, it's a statement of good intent, but it's not a statement of how you're going to do it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. So we've already had an initial first meeting with housing providers post writing this report, looking at one antisocial behaviour, but also about service improvements. So that will be an officer work stream which we'll now take forward, and we envisage to have this completed in autumn to then, if ONS wanted to bring that back, that would be fine. I mean, it'll be an officer working agreement, but certainly we'd like to, whether the time and task panel will stay in its entirety, you know, or a new panel. But I think that member engagement, informal member engagement, is really useful. But yeah, we're envisaging taking that forward over the summer and early autumn.
Can I just add, the recommendations in the reports, Mike just said, it's all pragmatic examination, Peter, as you know, they've done this another time and tasks. There's pragmatic examination, which then flags up the issues and areas of concern where to focus on. Some of them inevitably will be issues that are outside of our control or influence, down to governmental policy. But then again, you know, councillors do feed into government in all kinds of ways as well, in terms of policy. So it's very much that, you know, that's what the time and task enables the council then to do, to then take further. But I would certainly, being an old time and task and scrutineer and chairman of this committee, would be expecting that you'll probably want to be doing a review on this, on your work programme as you move forward, I would have thought. And I think that'd be very helpful for the council and the administration.
Yes, Councillor Empson.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting report, and to have actually had the housing providers in, I would think was probably quite an interesting thing for councillors. I would think that is something which has been said before, that would be nice to meet them, and they seem to be a little bit unwilling to chat. I was interested in Appendix 2, because to me it seems that all the providers seem to work in a, well, not slightly different way, in a very different way. I just take the point that if you look at Victory, for instance, they have 64 live cases, but they only have a stock of about 670 properties. So if they've got that many cases out of 670, but then you go down a little bit and you look at Clarion having 15 open cases, but they've got 4,000 stock, they're obviously judging things completely differently. So when it comes to a service level agreement, are we going to try and get one that's our agreement, like our agreement that's for all of them, or is it going to have to be slightly different for each provider to tailor to what they want to do?
So, as was mentioned in the report, the government is really focusing on this, and it's a focus we really welcome because it gives uniformity. So I chair the Housing Alliance as well. So I've been doing a lot of this work beforehand. What I've really welcomed through this process is finding the member priorities, because there's so many different pressures hitting housing at the moment. So this work stream really helped. To answer the direct questions about the performance, is one example of where we struggle with housing associations is that they don't work on a district level. They work on, obviously, they work on a district footprint when it comes to the allocation of housing, but when it comes to how they deal with antisocial behaviour, their patches are not linked to our specific district areas. So therefore, when they report on any of their performance, it's very difficult for them to do so. So with such a high level with Victory, that's 64 live cases across their stock, which includes a humongous amount across North Norfolk. So that's some of the issues we face. With the SLA, I'd be looking for turnaround times. So the amount, how quick they act on things, how quickly they report back to us, and through the central government, there'll be uniformity on how they act upon those issues as well.
Just come back and say, I have every faith in you two guys to sort this out. It's just like, just seems to be that it's going to be quite a difficult process, and I think that is the interesting part, to see how it works. Because as councillors, we want to know that everything is as we want it to be, if you know what I mean, and we want the providers all to be working for the residents as best we can.
Sorry, just to add that, Chairman, if I may, just when you look at the three providers, I mean, these are the three biggest providers. When you compare Saffron, Victory, which is now part of Flagship, and Clarion, I mean, you are talking about a very small housing provider, relatively speaking, in Saffron, a national provider in Clarion. So one of the things that the housing providers were certainly keen on us highlighting this issue, because actually it will help the service managers who work and are closest to residents are actually really keen on resolving issues. But when you've got an example like Clarion, when actually the boss is so far removed, so actually this is a really good opportunity. But generally, I think there's an opportunity here, and certainly for Richard and I and Helen to take that forward, I think we're looking forward to the discussion. But there wasn't a pushback from the housing provider. Actually, they were welcoming this. Yeah. So we'll see whether that plays out, of course, but that's what we'll come back in due course.
Given the degree of support that seems to have across the room, I suggest we go to the vote, which I presume...
Can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
I'd like to suggest we add to that recommendation, and the committee look forward to receiving a further report detailing progress to date. If Martin would be happy to accept that amendment.
I would just ask Emma, would we be adding it to the work programme, and therefore does it need to be in there if it's added to the work programme?
I think we pick it up in the next item because you've got the work programme.
That's what asterisk next to it to put it into the work programme. So yeah, I think we hold off with respect to Councillor Bullman, and then we will. I think everybody probably would like to see that added to the work programme. I see lots of nods coming back. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll take it all as one recommendation, if that's okay with everybody. All those in favour of the recommendation?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Wonderful. Thank you. We move on to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Work Programme, and I'll ask Emma to lead on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to, as we've got some new members on committee, and hopefully many of you are at the training tomorrow. If not, I will do a catch-all on those that can't attend, just to outline what the work programme is there for, how that's designed, so that you can understand how you get items on the committee programme. So this is the route through to get those on. What we're really keen we do, and again the training will cover this, is take what we call a topic approach to it. So it's making sure that what you're asking the committee to consider is timely, objective, looks at performance, there's sufficient interest in terms of public interest to look at the topic, and that it links in with a corporate priority. So what that then enables us to do is look at that item and really understand your objectives and your desired outcomes, so that we end up with work, meaningful work that's being looked at through the Overview and Scrutiny Committee work programme. So any items, new items that councillors want on there, myself and the chair will ask you to complete the topic form, which again will take you through in training, and we can make sure that that's looking in the right direction and is achieving those objectives and desired outcomes. It's just so that we make sure that we're looking at the right things and focusing officers' work in the right areas to give you the information that you need as an Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That being said, you've got before you the work programme as it stands at present, and you can see that our next planned item is the Council Partnership Register Review, which has been an ongoing piece of work, and we will bring that to you in September. And then after that, we've got some items coming through to November. So I think we've had the proposal for the previous item to come back onto the work programme. So I would just check in with officers in terms of best timing for that, so that we get that coming back into Overview and Scrutiny at the right time. And then, as I said, any new items for the work programme, I'm happy for you to raise them here, but we then ask that you go away, complete that topic form, and we're really clear on what that looks like on the agenda going forward. So hopefully that clears that up.
So can we take Councillor Bullman's initial statement as a proposal that we put the previous item on the work programme, perhaps under the to be confirmed status, because we don't want to set a date in stone which actually can't be met because it's only just been started, but that could definitely be added to that list of other things that will be brought forward at some point, and I'm happy to second him on that. Do we accept that as a quick vote on that? All those in favour of adding that to the work programme?
Again, unanimous.
Wonderful. Okay. So anybody who'd like to come on anything that Emma has said regarding the topic form or the programme itself? Yes, Councillor Lane.
Hello. Yeah, it's not specifically a question about anything that Emma has just said, but on the work programme, I think maybe some of the names have changed. Page 3, it says to receive updates from. Is Joe Coppleston still the rep on Water Resources East? And
Very, very good point.
Ken Kelly, I'm not quite sure, but I just wondered if they were accurate.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I need to, and actually, we probably shouldn't be putting names on. It should be roles. So I'll update that. You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything to add, or we could just take this as I presume this item has to be voted on because we're accepting the matter programme. Yeah, are we all happy to accept the work programme as it starts and knowing that it's not set in stone and it can be added to, and no one feels like that we're closing down any debate or discussion of this in the future? All those in favour of accepting it as it is?
Yeah, that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. We move to item 8, exclusion of the press and public. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining